Today, this is going to be an awesome class. So prepare yourselves. Dude, well, hang on. I will guarantee that I'm going to leave the room thinking it was an awesome class. You may not. That's okay, because I'm going to die in my own grave, and none of you are going to come to my funeral, and I'm probably not going to come to yours. But I'm going to leave thinking it was an awesome class. So I'll go to yours, dude. See if you die before me. I'm there. I'm there for you, pal. Okay, so what inspired today's class is well, first off, I need my 3 volunteers to come up. And thanks for volunteering. And what inspired, you can just have a seat. Yeah. And what inspired today's class was I was listening to, I went home on Tuesday night, I think it was late in the morning. I wake up at all hours of the night, and I listen to the BBC. And I was blown away by how many things were coming up on the news feed or on the radio that were things that we were talking about in class. And I just picked out a couple of them. And then that continued into yesterday. And I just said, okay, let's just do a class, and I'm going to call it In the News. And I want to explain something. So really fast. So you're, just say your names again so we're all ready. So, or say your names. And
my name is Sean Semenko.
Sean.
I'm Anushree Sinha.
I'm Kayana Okendo.
Kayana, K, right?
K. Yeah, you guys can call me K.
K. All right. So, hey, look at that. Look at her. Look at your shirt. Can you get a shot of her shirt, by the way? Awesome. That's perfect for today. Okay. So, what I want to do is we're going to talk about current events, and I'm going to tie it to this question of borders, because it's really all about borders. But first off, I just want to put a couple things up in the news, and here's your job. You have 3 pieces of paper sitting in front of you: a yellow, a pink, or a red. We'll assume it's red, like a traffic light. Green means keep going. Red means stop. Yellow means like I think I got questions, or I'm not sure, or something is up, right? But you can keep going, and if I don't see a yellow, I'm going to just move forward. So right now, just keep green on top, and if you really need me to stop, you can stop. And then what I need you to do is ask the question of what you're not sure about, or where you think maybe I'm not telling the full story, or maybe you think there's another part of the story. You don't even know what it is. You don't have to know what it is. But there's something about, I'm going to talk about the news, but it's just like, I don't really know, okay? So you can throw a question out. We may go the whole class. In my ideal world, we would go the whole class, and you'd never give me a pink. The pink would mean basically that, listen, you need, I'm just not so much, it may be that I'm unclear about what you're saying, but it also might mean stop. You just went down like some kind of ideology path, and you need to come back and go down a different path. And why this is important is because 2 of the topics we're going to talk about today are Daka and Trump's impeachment, and what's behind that. And all in the context of borders. And I have this idea that how many of you, if I gave you a microphone, could come up and talk about Daka that just was heard by the Supreme Court on Tuesday? How many people could talk about Daka? How many people could spend 2 minutes talking about what's really behind Trump's impeachment? Or the attempts to impeach Trump. How many could spend 2 minutes talking about it? 1 person? Anybody else? 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. So these are highly political. And you might be saying, how is this knucklehead going to talk about Trump's impeachment and a race and ethnic relations course in the United States? But I am, and it's going to fit. And I'm going to try to do it in a way that helps us understand what this is about. Not to say whether he should or should not be impeached. That's irrelevant. But when I get done, you'll have an understanding of what it's about. And I think I'm going to make a really bold assertion here. you might be one of the only people, therefore, among all your friends who have some understanding of what's going on and why it does or does not matter. Okay, cool? Which I think is pretty awesome in the context of a race and ethnic relations course. So here, let's go to the first thing right here. I jumped online. This is St. Mark's Square. This is just really fast. St. Mark's Square in Venice. How many have been here in Venice, in that square? It's not supposed to be underwater. It's underwater. Not only is it underwater, but it's flooding it's only flooded this bad one other time. And here's the key. We don't know if it's climate change or not. We have no idea. But 5 of the 10 worst floods in St. Mark's Square have been in the past 20 years. And these are the kinds of headlines that we're seeing over and over and over again. And that's why when I talked about climate change and climate refugees, this becomes a really important issue and one that we should think about. Here are bushfires in Australia. There are always bushfires in Australia. This is not the issue. However, what is being stated now, once again, very similarly, is they've never seen such intense fires, so extensive and so intense at such an early stage in the season. And last year they said the same thing. And presumably next year it will be even more intense and earlier in the season. And so you understand, this is the thing, right? This is not caused by climate change, nor is the flood caused by climate change. But when you see these things happening earlier and earlier, then it leads us to have to think about, we want to be thoughtful and be thinking about it, okay? You know who this is? How many know who this is? How many know why I put this up here? Who knows? Do any of you know? Because Blackpink actually is a K-pop group that just beat the billion view mark. Even BTS, the most popular K-pop group in the world, has not had any single music videos that have had 1 billion views, and Blackpink has their first one. And what's that? Not over 1 billion, my friend. Not on YouTube. You mean they only have 4, so therefore they only have 4 to watch? Yeah. Well, yeah. I would say they have more than 4. I just watched about 10 of them, but nonetheless, they don't have as many as BTS. All right, so listen, the idea is they just reached 1 billion views. And, you know, Beyonce is cool, but she doesn't have anywhere close to a video with 1 billion views, nor does Taylor Swift. All right, so here's another one that just popped up in the news feed. We talked a couple weeks ago about forced labor in the cotton industry. And by the way, the 2 people who were up here, you are going to go back and have some thoughts about some things that maybe we could do at Thon. And I don't know if you ever had any thoughts. Maybe it would be nice before the end of the semester to come up. But these are the idea is that Uyghurs. We in English we often say Uyghurs, but Uyghurs is the Muslim minority in China. That is, the Chinese state is got their foot on their necks in lots and lots of different ways. And what's being stated is the Chinese state, they're being forced to pick cotton. And the thing about cotton in this particular region is it's really highly valued cotton. It's very high-end cotton. It's very expensive. And once again, it enters into the clothing stream. And so if you're buying clothing in 2019 that is picked by people who are forced to pick cotton, i.e. slaves, regardless of where they are in the world, it would seem like it's something that we may want to consider. Right? Is that fair just to say? Or, I don't know, maybe. I consider it. Maybe we don't. But anyway, so these 3 things just popped up on my feed. There were lots of others. But this is just in the past day and a half. All right? Cool? Which means this is the point of this class, to stay really relevant. If you're watching the news and you're paying attention, you're going to start making all these connections as a result of 119. Okay, so let me talk about Daka so it starts with the Dreamers Act. And here's how we can say the following. We talk about immigration. This isn't just an issue in the United States. So for those of you who fancy yourself to be really liberal, or, maybe wear a shirt that says stand with immigrants, or think that, what Donald Trump, President Trump is trying to do is really a terrible thing. I do want to remind you that there are over 60 countries in the world that have built or are currently building walls around their borders to keep other people out. It's not just a United States thing. So all around the world, people are struggling with this issue of immigration. And I know that a lot of people like to get really snarky about the U.S. It's like, oh, Americans. And often when they say that, they're talking about white Americans, but Americans. And just to remind you, there are over 60 countries in the world. 9 out of 10 wars currently happening in the world today are about borders. People are battling this out. It's a very touchy issue. It's a very difficult issue. There are always people moving back and forth, and there will always be people moving back and forth illegally or without documents. That's just the nature of life itself. It's also true in the United States. And we can build as many walls as we want, and there will be people moving back and forth. It doesn't mean we shouldn't build walls. It doesn't mean that walls are good. It's irrelevant. It's just a sociological reminder that this is an ongoing issue. So we're trying to figure out what to do. Once people come here without documentation, you got to decide how you're going to address them, how we're going to work with it. Because probably it's never good anywhere in any society to have people living inside of your systems that don't have documentation. It's just like not what you want. There are problems, there are legal issues, insurance issues, health issues. There are so many issues that come into play. It's just really nice to know who's inside your borders. Like Penn State would like to know who's actually taking classes at Penn State. Or, you have swipe card readers at dormitories. You want to know who's coming and going, right? It's just a good idea. And so this is something that countries are constantly struggling with, okay? So then when you get immigrants entering the United States, and let's say now they're undocumented or illegal. I don't like to use the word illegal because we're all, from a native perspective, we're all illegal. So I generally use the word undocumented, okay? And then if they come and they have children and the children grow up, or let's say they come with their children grow up as Americans, and then the children are born here and they have citizenship, but their parents don't. It creates an immense number of problems. But also, if you come across the border with children, and then your children only know the United States, so they grow up learning English, they grow up going to schools in the U.S., they grow up as part of U.S. culture, they grow up as Americans, and then they're here for 20 or 30 years, and they still don't have documentation. What do you do? What do you do? You're really in a conundrum. Because I've met people who are undocumented in the United States who speak English, who are more American than me. At least I can speak a sufficient amount of Spanish. I met people who are undocumented. They don't speak anything other than English. They speak with a Middle American accent. They are completely connected to U.S. culture. They don't travel because they can't really travel. And what do you do with them? What do you do? This has been the struggle forever. And so what happens is in the United States, over a certain period of time, we have different amnesty programs. And then we say, all right, listen, all you people who are living illegally or without papers in the United States, here's what you need to do. We're gonna start over. We're gonna hit reset, and you all just come to the front, fill out your paperwork. So we're gonna run some background checks on all of you, and then we're just gonna make you sit. We're gonna give you a path to citizenship because, whatever, you can't just be living like this, right? So every 10 or 15 years, there's some new proposal in the United States for some kind of path to citizenship for people who are undocumented and without papers. And many countries around the world do this. So it makes sense, right? You get it? Because what do you do? Right? Because it's really difficult to just try to round people up? Like, come on, man. Especially once people are integrated into a culture. So we can make the argument to do that, but it's very difficult to do. Okay, got it? So the DREAM Act was in 1991, first put forward as a bipartisan act, Republicans and Democrats. And they said, look, once again, we've got all these people without papers. What we're going to do is we're going to offer them a path to citizenship. And they battled over this for 20 years, basically, right? They battled and battled and battled. It's like they got enough votes and then they didn't have enough. And the sponsors of it in both the House and in the Senate would try to attach it onto different bills, like defense spending bill. And then they'd say like, yeah, we got enough votes here, but I don't know. And then they didn't. And so these were Republicans under George Bush's when this went through. And then it was, after Bush, it's just, Clinton and then, okay, you got it, right? Finally, nothing. It just sits dormant. Nothing happens. This is the DREAM Act. And then Obama comes along, and I'm going to explain what it is. Obama comes along in 2012 and just says, you know what? Congress isn't going to pass legislation on this, so I'm just going to go ahead and write an executive order. And here's what the act is. Here's what it says. It says, first off, you got to be deportable. So you have to be here without documents. So if we catch you, you have to be the person who we would send back home. You have to have come to the United States under the DREAM Act when you were under 18, but later it changed to 16. And with Obama's Daka Act, it was under 16. Okay? And meaning you couldn't come here when you were like 20 years old and sign up for this, because that's not cool. Then you had to be living in the U.S. for at least 4 consecutive years at some point. So you couldn't come here, let's say from Mexico, and then slip back over the border for a few years, and then slip back over the border again for a year. You know what I mean? No, you have to be here. Second, you have to be 12 to 35 years when the bill passes. So you can't be really old and you can't be really young. If you were too young, it means you wouldn't be here. You have to be a high school grad or have your GED or be enrolled or a graduate of college. Because you can go to college without citizenship, right? It doesn't matter. And finally, no serious criminal convictions. So you can't have a felony and you can't have a serious misdemeanor. I don't know what a serious misdemeanor is, but we can imagine what it might be, okay? If you qualify for those, the Republicans and the Democrats back in 1991 said this is like a really, really good thing, but they couldn't get enough votes. And even some really conservative people supported the DREAM Act. People who you may not think would if you follow politics. There are a lot of people who signed on to this and just said, oh my God. The military was high in the early 2000s was a strong supporter of the DREAM Act. Because the military was having a difficult time getting recruits, because the economy was doing really well, and you don't have to be a citizen to be in the U.S. military, so you know. And so the economy is doing really well, and not enough people were signing up for the military. So the military comes along. Are you guys good? Are we good? All right. You may never say anything. If I do my job well, you're just going to sit here with a front row seat, right? Okay, so the military says, look, economy's doing really well. Everybody's going to college or taking jobs or we don't have enough people enlisting in the military. So what this would do would be to tell people who, not undocumented people, so these would be people, you have to at least have your green card. You have to have some kind of at least temporary residency to join the military, but it will tell people with temporary residency anyway, if you join the military, the DREAM Act said, basically one provision of this will be an almost certain path to citizenship. So spend 4 years or 8 years or 12 years in the military, and either while you're in the military or when you get out, it'll be an act to citizenship to be a citizen of the United States. So the military was strongly supportive of this, okay? And right now, DACA is kind of up in the air with the military because it's a similar kind of thing. Got it? So this is where we're at. So these would be kids. Imagine these kids right here who only know the U.S. They don't know anywhere else. And now we're saying, what are we going to do with you? Because you're here illegally. Your parents brought you here. We know it wasn't your choice, but your parents brought you here. And now we got to decide what we're going to do. And what are we going to do? Right? It's a really difficult conundrum. And it's not easy just to say, hey, well, what we're going to do is we're just going to send you back home because you're illegal. It's like, well, you can say that, but are you going to be, who's going to be the person who just ushers these kids onto a bus or onto an airplane and just says, okay, you're going home to a place where you've never been, you don't speak the language, you don't know all your friends are here. It's like maybe they don't even have any relatives at home. And they wouldn't, not just with them. I mean, obviously they'd be with their parents. But like, who wants to do that? I'm not sure I've ever met anyone except sociopaths who would actually want to do that. So it's a really difficult thing. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. I'm just saying it's a really hard thing to manage. And so, my family matters, your family matters, we all matter. Yeah, we all matter. Hashtag we all matter. But like, it's really like I stand with immigrants, right? I stand with immigrants, and I stand with the need to have some kind of laws. There's systems in place where we address the issues that are conundrums that will never be solved, and I don't know how to solve them. I don't get paid enough to solve them. I just get paid enough to point them out. So, here are some recruits. I talked about the military a little too soon, but, being sworn in, right? And so imagine that these aren't citizens and they're being sworn into the military and they're in the, so there are actually a couple of really well-known cases. There's a guy, a gentleman, I think he's from El Salvador. So he did come here with his temporary residency, or he got temporary residency, but he doesn't have a green card. He doesn't have citizenship. He went to Iraq, did a few different tours in Iraq, had PTSD as a result of his time in Iraq, got out of the military because of his PTSD, post-traumatic stress. He spiraled downward, got arrested for a couple violent misdemeanors and maybe a felony because as a result of his service to our country in Iraq. And then got deported back to El Salvador, a country he left when he was 1 year old. And what do you say to this guy? It's like, hang on, you served in the military, you were on the battle lines of Iraq, you got PTSD, you came home, you committed some crimes. Okay, we get that, you got that, but PTSD, it's complicated. Now we're going to send you home to a country you've never been to. He doesn't even have any other than distant relatives. It's like, okay, so what? Right, what? What do you do with this guy? So these are the kinds of cases. Now, those are the kinds of cases that make the headlines, but those are rare, actually. It's much more the kinds of things that, it's complicated. Okay, are we good? You see the complication. This is Daka. So Donald Trump says, listen, the President of the United States should not be in a position to decide what this country does with, right now, over 700,000 undocumented people living in the United States who have signed up for Daka. They've signed up for the program. There was estimated to be 1.1 million people eligible, so we're going to go back, for Daka, and about 700,000 signed up for it under Barack Obama when he first proposed it. Trump comes into office and says, look, with all due respect, former President Obama, it's not what he called him, but I will be respectful, you shouldn't be deciding this. This should be decided by the American people. And since the American people aren't going to decide, they voted in legislators, and we'll let them decide. And they've been trying to decide it since 1991. And we should just put it back into Congress and let them just fight over it and figure it out. Who are you to step forward and just put this program forward as though you were king of the world? And you're not. And so you shouldn't have that power. And so Tuesday, the Supreme Court heard both sides. They heard the pro-DACA side and the Trump administration making the argument that DACA is unconstitutional, that the President of the United States does not have the power to decide immigration policy in the United States, therefore it's unconstitutional, therefore Supreme Court should rule that we can sign off to cancel and get rid of DACA. That's what the Trump administration is arguing. Now, also, by the way, I'm sure I'm not going to make any claims about Donald Trump and about what he and people like Stephen Miller, one of his folks that appears to have quite a number of racist bones in his body as far as I can ascertain, but nonetheless, that's neither here nor there. That's the argument. And on its merits, you can't write it off. See, so a lot of people have this idea that, Trump's doing this really, really horrible thing, and he's going to send all these little kids back, and so on. It's like, well, what would you do? All right, Dave, go ahead. Question.
Just clarify, did you say Stephen Miller has racist bones in his body?
Well, I don't know.
I was going to say, where were you getting that from, just so everybody has context?
Right. I know, I shouldn't have said that. All right, that's fair. I don't like when I make comments. Listen, I will say, I shouldn't ever use the R word like that. I don't. I would just say I don't. Yeah, that's fair. I will just say that I don't. I don't like the dude. I don't think he's very thoughtful. So, but I guess I'm not thoughtful by saying that. So, all right, here we go. All right. Okay, one other thing. Dude. All right. So, just so you know, in case you're wondering, this is something that Donald Trump has said a number of times. Many, many people say, and it's a thing that you have to you hear, and it sticks. It's sticky that illegal or undocumented immigrants commit a lot of crimes. So they commit more crimes than anybody else. Well, they commit crimes just by breathing inside the border of the United States, right? Since they're here illegally, right? All right. But the data across the board, all the research from the FBI on down, Bureau of Crime Statistics, these are data that were pulled together by the Cato Institute, and the Cato Institute is the most prominent libertarian think tank. And the libertarians, once again, are people who are true conservatives, not fake conservatives, but true conservatives, meaning they would be seen by most people as being on the extreme right of conservatism. But the undocumented immigrants are 40% less likely to be arrested and 47% less likely to be incarcerated. So it is, and legal immigrants even less likely to be arrested and incarcerated. So the idea that the other countries, say like Mexico, and this goes back to like this thing that Donald Trump said a long time ago, these countries are sending us their worst people, their rapists, their murderers, etc. That's actually the FBI and the Libertarian Cato Institute, but certainly the FBI would say that's absolutely not true. There's zero data. All the data show that undocumented immigrants commit far fewer crimes than other people. Okay? And I just feel there's a need to point that out. So what we're working with is a population of people that's really tough to know what to do with, because they're also a population of people who are probably going to work harder than on average most other people, because you have to, because you can't. It's really difficult to get any kind of social services, any kind of welfare, anything that you might get free from the government. It's really hard, and so you just got to work. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps, literally. And so everyone who I have ever met in my life who's been undocumented in the United States, this is anecdotal data, has outworked everybody around them. So, all right. So when I see this, now this is important here. So this was the caravan of immigrants coming toward the United States. Started in Honduras, went through Guatemala, went all the way through Mexico, and ultimately came to the borders of the United States. And this was a big thing a year ago, right? So all these people walking all that way, and then here and there catching a bus or jumping on top of a train or something, right? But what's really important is this flag right here. And it's a flag of Guatemala. So I want to talk about Guatemala for a hot minute, okay? Because I want to kind of walk you through a couple things. Because the question is, why are people coming? And there are a lot of reasons people come. People come because they want a better life for themselves. People come for the same reason that almost all of us in here would travel illegally to another country. If we were really struggling and the only way that we thought we could move forward and build a life, like for our kids, right? If you had kids, you're going to do whatever you need to do for your kids. So a similar kind of thing. But there are other reasons people come. And I want to talk about Guatemala a little bit because it's just a good case study. There's also a lot of violence. People are coming to flee violence. And so I just had a conversation last week with somebody from Guatemala about all the reasons why she left Guatemala. And the story is really quite striking, to be honest with you. And this person is here in the U.S. So the first place to start, you ready? So hang on. I'm going to talk history just for like 45 seconds. Yo, hang on, man. I see a few people with their eyes closed. Like, how could you have your eyes closed right now? All right, got it. All right, listen, man. Dude, I know it's hot in here. Don't fall asleep. All right, you ready? So, dudes, so you got it. So, wait, let me ask the three of you. So Daka. So I gave you kind of a sense of Daka. How, do you feel like you understand better, like what Trump's doing right now? And you feel like you understand better, like what it is and how it is? And was I fair?
Yeah.
Except for the Stephen Miller comment. Was I fair? Yeah. I feel like I feel like it. Okay, that's good. You feel like I was fair?
I feel like you were fair until like an extent on which you're just focusing on the Trump administration.
Yeah, I'm just focusing on what DACA is right now because it's in the news right now, and I'm seeing all these like shrill headlines against Trump and like, oh my God, how horrible this is, and I'm like, well, hang on, but you got. Look, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, so the Trump administration is saying it's unconstitutional. I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I'm barely a sociologist. I can barely stand on my own 2 feet. But however, I do recognize that it's particularly complicated. So if I listen to some opinion person on MSNBC try to explain to me why it's horrible, I'd probably be wise to go listen to someone somewhere else. Okay? Now we're going to go in a different direction. But I gotta tell you, yes. Yeah. 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 Okay, got you. So in the end of the day, in executive order, it's still part of the Constitution that the President of the United States can make an executive order, right? And so, exactly, and that's why it gets up to the Supreme Court, because the lower courts all said no to the Trump administration. And these are also really smart judges, and they all said, no, it is constitutional. And so they appealed, and it bounces up again. No, it is constitutional. Appeal bounces up again. Ultimately gets to the Supreme Court. Now the Supreme Court, who are 9 people who probably understand the Constitution, they're going to argue about it, they're going to decide. I'm not going to decide. So I never said if it was or wasn't constitutional. I just said if it wasn't a complicated issue, it never have made it to the Supreme Court. So we'll see how they decide. Yep. Okay. Anybody else? Are we good? So listen, man. Latin America, you ready? Latin America, when the Spanish and the Portuguese and the French and the Dutch and the English all came to the Americas, they aside from slaughtering the indigenous peoples, aside from bringing Africans to do most of the work, because the vast majority of Africans who were taken out of Africa ended up in Latin America, not in North America. Aside from that, they also created just immensely, horrifically unequal systems in which they built, which really rich people who were able to get control of land, get land deeded to them by kings and queens, created these just immensely unequal systems and impoverished the vast majority of the population, such that, 95% of all the wealth would be held by 1% of the people living in the country for centuries, right? Just immensely unequal, just really terrible conditions. And so, don't take my word for it. I am a Latin Americanist. This is what I studied all through graduate school. But it doesn't matter. This is what Latin America looks like. It just gets ceded, all these territories, by the kings and queens of Europe. And, my God, it just, you just can't even imagine the stories, right? So now hold that right there. You ready? Hey, yeah. Starting with the next slide, I need to give you a trigger warning, okay? So you've heard of ISIS. So these are the radical Islamic groups. The Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. The Levant is the Western Mediterranean of Israel, Palestine, Syria, Jordan, and parts of Iraq. Or the Islamic State, that's their logo. You've all heard of the horrific things that they've done, right? In the name of whatever the bullshit thing is that they believe in. They claim it's Islam, but of course. So here are some of the Islamic fighters. So here's the trigger. They've done really, here's some of the stuff they've done. Executing people, burying bodies in mass graves, decapitating people, crucifixion, torture, burning people alive in their homes, rape of women and girls captured to be prostitutes. It just goes on and on and on and on. How many hundreds of thousands, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of innocent people have been killed by these brutes? Okay? Got it? And you think, who are these people? Who the hell are these people? Who are they? So here's a wait, hang on, trigger warning, okay? So here's a guy who was decapitated by ISIS. He was a prisoner. And, when you go, these are the suits that all the prisoners would wear. And Bassem, by the way, who was here, is, he's one of the founders. He's starting a museum in Iraq to just as a memory of all the victims of ISIS. And so one of the things is having all of these suits like that. Here's another video of people shooting innocent villagers. Just horrible. I could go on. I could show you endless photos of people being decapitated. You could watch videos. You could just on and on to think, who the hell are these people, right? Who is it? So then we go, okay, so now we go from here. Now we're going back to South America. So the United States didn't really get so involved as the United States in Latin America until the end of the 19th century in the passage of what was called the Monroe Doctrine. And the Monroe Doctrine basically said, look, y'all can fight over Africa, y'all can fight over Asia, but none of our enemies, none of the other countries come here to the Americas. The Americas are ours, and we're going to control it. Okay? So we then are responsible in South America. And you say, okay, got it. We created our big multinational corporations went down. We ensured for over 100 plus years that people in power would have our best interests in mind, meaning the United States, that dictators are fine as long as the dictators support us. Dictatorship is not a problem. military weapons, economic weapons, whatever it is. We sustained the inequality. So the democracy that we wanted here in the United States, we actually imposed in South America the opposite of that. Not the democracy, right? So we continued the inequality that I talked about earlier, we sustained that in Latin America. And there was never equality. Okay? Got it? So most of the people throughout Latin America are living in really pretty terrible conditions. Got it? The vast majority of the population, but the wealthy do quite well. Okay, so one of the ways hang on, I go back. So one of the things that happens is when you have inequality to such extensive degrees, people are eventually going to rise up, right? Like you can only, like, dude, if I pull you out of your chair and put my foot on your neck, and I can hold you there, but eventually you're going to try to get up, like you're going to. And eventually you're going to call out to your friends and you're going to say, hey, help me get this knucklehead off me. And then if I do it, then I let you up, and then I do it again, and I do it again. And eventually you're going to start to say, listen, man, we got to take this dude out. We got to do something with this guy. Like, he's crazy. And you're going to start mobilizing. That's what happens. You're going to mobilize, right? Got like workers. Does anybody work at like, I don't know, like Chick-fil-A or McDonald's or somewhere where you have like a shit manager and everyone hates that person? So imagine every manager is like is a shit manager. And it's just, and eventually you're going to rise up. You're going to do something. So in Latin America, poor people start coming together and have conversations. Just like in the United States, poor slaves would come together. And the response on the part of governments in Latin America in the 20th century was to create these death squads. And so the United States said, okay, listen, we got to protect our interests in Latin America because this is our area of the world, and we're going to protect our interests, and we're going to make sure that these governments and their militaries are acting at our behest and to support our corporations and so on. And so one piece of this is going to be to create these death squads. And the death squads would be the squads that if you get out of line, like this dude over here, bro, if he gets out of line and then he starts mobilizing his peeps against me, got it? Well, and I realize that, well, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go create my escuadrones de muerto. I'm going to go pull some other people together and say, listen, man, those people are getting out of hand. You need to really take them out. You need to take care of it. Right? Got it? This is what governments do. You can speak up until it really matters. The moment you start threatening the powers that be, they're going to come down on you. So we create these death squads, funded by the United States, trained by the United States, and in all of these countries here and more, right? Because, death squads in Ecuador and Peru and, in Bolivia right now, there's a lot happening in Bolivia. So here's one of the squadrons in Guatemala. Okay? Trained in the United States. Weapons all come from the United States. Trained in the U.S. Trained by people in the military in the U.S. who went down to Guatemala to train them, or trained by members of the CIA. But this is extensively well documented. You can look it up if you want, but you don't even... Yeah, look it up and see what it is. Okay? So here's some of what they did. This is Guatemalan military with some campesinos. Right? And these may, in all likelihood, because, these are villagers and they were maybe mobilized, maybe asking, who knows what they were asking for, but unarmed, maybe coming together to ask for or demanding different kinds of treatment or protesting the treatment by the government or any number of things, right? But here are villagers. Here's some others, right? Guatemalan army acknowledged destroying 440 Mayan villages. So wait, who's the Guatemalan dude who was up here the other day? Wait, who's the guy? Who's the guy from Guatemala? And I was saying, dude, you have a killer nose. Mayan nose, right? So those would be his relatives. And so hundreds and hundreds of thousands civilians being killed by the death squads funded by the United States. Hundreds of thousands. So I think, wait, hang on. It's really interesting. You have ISIS over here doing this. And when I started looking at all the videos and the photos from ISIS, I start going back to my, 35, 40 years of studying this. I'm thinking about all the photos that I have seen and people I have talked to and villagers who experienced massacres like this and thinking, wow, this is really familiar. And I think, I guess if I want to understand ISIS, maybe I don't have to go that far. And this is actually one thing that was pretty common is pick people up, like students at a university. You start mobilizing here and you form some kind of student union groups, and then they come along and they pick you up, they kill you, and then they dump your bodies out of a dump truck in the middle of the night on a street corner. So this photo is actually from El Salvador. It's not from Guatemala. I just wanted to use it because it's so powerful. You just look. Human beings. Civilians. Got it? Civilians. All right, so here's ISIS buried thousands in 72 mass graves. So when Lori and I were in Iraq, we passed by one of the mass graves. And Bassem talked about this. And just horrific. Just throwing people in these mass graves, even alive. And this is what ISIS did. And so did the death squads throughout South America, paid for and funded by U.S. taxpayers. And so, wow. So look at these two people. Looks like they were buried, sort of holding on to each other. They may have been killed in that way. And so here's somebody paying respects. And here's a mass grave in Guatemala. Those are all human beings. Children, women, elderly. Right? These are human beings. These aren't violent radicals.
I was just wondering if you could talk about maybe like the different places where mass graves have taken place. So like in Thailand, where I'm from, there were mass graves of prisoners of war who were building the death railroad.
Yep.
And those were American soldiers and Dutch soldiers and British soldiers. And that was also a thing that happened, and like why the view of that and what you're talking about is so different.
Because when we look in that particular case, we said that as part of a war that was actually declared internationally, and these were secret wars. These weren't wars that were ever declared. These were secrets. These were all happening underneath, behind any laws, right? So, and that's what really makes it different. What makes it more problematic? But there are mass graves all over the world. I mean, people commit horrible acts of genocide and killing all around the world. But yet Thailand, that's a good example. These are villagers, look, and they're holding photos of people who were killed. And so this guy might decide, hey, I'm going to travel to the United States illegally because we don't have anything here. We've lost everything. We have nothing. So I'm going to go to the U.S. and I'm going to escape the violence. Right? And so now what? Right? And then these kids maybe become his kids in the United States. And then we say, okay, you're here illegally and we got to do something. We got to throw you out. Well, wait, hang on a second. It gets complicated because so many people have come to the United States illegally to flee the violence that was created by and perpetuated by us, and really horrible violence, the same violence that ISIS is doing. And so you think like, oh, God, what do we do? Like, how do we make sense of this? And what decisions do we make? And like, I don't know. And then I think, okay, now I see these people coming, and how many of them are fleeing the violence? Right? And I'm not saying, therefore, we should let them in. No, not at all. That's not it. It's just that for me, I see these connections and borders, and everything is connected, y'all. It's all connected. There are no easy decisions. If you think it's an easy decision, you don't understand. If you're not confused, you have no idea what's going on. Trust me. It's immensely complicated. And my only job right now, by the way, is just to get you interested in maybe looking up some of this stuff, especially if you're an American and your tax dollars are paying for some of this. And I should add that death squads across Latin America are starting to pick up again. And they're also continue to be funded by the United States. I'm starting to see this in places, and I'm thinking like, oh, shit. So here we go. So these guys here, return to sender, impeach Obama, agents secure our borders, don't change diapers. What do you think? If I ask them, why do you think all these people from Guatemala are coming, or El Salvador, or Honduras? Or we can just go on and on. Why do you think they're coming? Do you think they know those stories? Do you think they have any idea? It's not everybody is coming because they're fleeing some kind of death squad, right? I mean, that's clear. A lot of people are coming just because they're poor. Some people are coming because they're poor because they made really stupid decisions and now they're poor. Or maybe, I don't know, you shouldn't have had 5 children, or you shouldn't have done this or that, or I don't know. Like, there are a lot of people coming for a lot of reasons. But some are coming, many are coming for these reasons, to flee a system that is really immensely oppressive and problematic. And so what do you do? And do they know about it? And do they have any idea? And what responsibility do they have to actually learn? To have opinions and really not know anything about it? Like, come on, dudes. I get it. Return to sender. Yeah, it's illegal, but have a modicum of respect for a hot minute to actually say, do I know what's going on? Like, maybe I don't know. Maybe I should learn. Obama isn't right. Just go, Obama decides, I'm going to sign the executive order. That doesn't mean I'm right, that he's right. Like, I'm going to be the nice guy. It's like, no, dude, that doesn't make you the nice guy. That's actually in some ways the easy way out. So it's like, okay. So I don't know. Why is really, really important. And it's really complicated. And I've been looking at this for 40 years. By the way, this issue right here is why I became politicized. And I'll tell you the moment I became politicized. When the death squads in El Salvador got the command, it later turned out, from a colonel who was directly under the employment of the United States to sequester, rape, kill, and mutilate 4 American nuns who were going down to San Salvador, who just flew into San Salvador there to help the poor. That was the moment when I learned about that, and that's the moment that I dove in. I said, okay, I knew there was something going on in the world that I didn't understand, and I said, I can't afford to be ignorant anymore. So I said, I'm in. So I've now spent my life trying to figure this out. Okay, so now you want to know why the United States would do something so horrible? So you think like, oh my God, the U.S., we're a terrible country, right? No, not really. Because when I grew up, this is what I grew up. The U.S. versus the USSR. And all the red is what's controlled by the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republic. There were 2 empires in the world, my friend. There was the West, led by the United States, and there was the right, led by Russia. And the right was the USSR, all the countries together, and in the West was what would be really kind of considered the U.S. and NATO and our Western allies. Okay? Cool? And, dude, this was serious. They wanted to kill us. They were absolutely wanting to destroy it. They were built a system around the ideology of the Marxist communist ideology. It was a totalitarian state, anything but a Marxist state, but nonetheless, right? And we were built around what we considered freedom and democracy, and we were anything but free and democratic, because if we were, we wouldn't be funding death squads. But nonetheless, we were more free than the USSR. And I grew up with these images. We had enough, it was estimated by one scientist that the United States and Russia had enough nuclear missiles to blow the world up about 50 times. So, you imagine your lives, right? I'm a little kid. We used to have these bomb drills in my school, and I shit you not. We would go down the basement, and it was like nuclear missile. I shit you not. Right? I shit you not. And we had nuclear missile drills that we would go and hide. Imagine, here you are, the 3 of you. Imagine now you got to get underneath the table. The siren goes off, you got to get, as if that's going to protect you from a nuclear blast. You know what I mean? Oh my God. I grew up with that, y'all, right? This was it. So it is the monster. Man, we are protecting ourselves from this these people that are trying to really take over the planet. Now, of course, what they never told us was, which I later learned when I was 23, I read this book called The Russians by an author called Hedrick Smith. And he was a New York Times correspondent living in Moscow for about 6 years. And he just read, it was just a biography about average Russians. And I learned that actually they don't want to kill us either. They're actually really afraid of us, the average Russians. They're just like knuckleheads, just like me and everybody else. And so it's like these people in power who for some reason got a lot of power to make us afraid of them and them afraid of us. And so you got all these, this is in Red Square, by the way, in Moscow. It's just like, look at these missiles, man. They had like 20,000 missiles, and we had about 20,000 missiles. And like, that's what I would say in colloquial English, a shit ton of missiles. It's a lot of missiles, and we were very afraid, and the United States was very, very afraid of the Soviet Union. And so we were afraid that the Soviet Union was going to take over all of Latin America and Marxist communist ideology. So I used to do a lot of work with, I'll tell you kind of cool. So I was really interested in the Catholic Church in Latin America because a lot of priests, are there any Catholics here? How many of you are Catholic? So a lot of priests and nuns started reading the Bible in the words of Christ as communism. And they started reading the word, and Jesus, it's very easy to see Jesus as a communist. I mean, it's like, what, you help the poor, you feed the poor, you do whatever you have to do. Rich people give up your riches. I mean, there are all sorts of things, right? It goes against prosperity gospel and trying to get poor people to buy you jets and stuff. But nonetheless, it's easy to read the Bible that way. And so all these priests and nuns were saying, look, we are living in this system that is just horribly supportive of poverty and violence and infant mortality rates in parts of Brazil that are upwards to 300, meaning 300 infants die before they reach the age of 1. And it's just like you can't even imagine, right? And so all these priests and nuns start to say, we need to support a more egalitarian world around us. Equality, right? Hang on. Everyone take like a deep breath because I'm just getting good. Now I'm going to talk about Ukraine right now. So you want to know why Trump's getting impeached? I'm going to tell you what's behind it. All right? This is good. How many of you, I'm going to give you the outline of it. How many of you would be the only person in your friends' network that would have something sensitive? If you remember what I say to you, would be the only person in your friend network to have something sensible to say if someone asked you, why is Trump getting impeached? What did he do? Raise your hands. How many would, if you remember? Really? Oh, so you know what? Wait, you know what? You have friends who know? No, I'm asking, how many of you, if you listen to what I'm about to say for the next 15 minutes, and you remember it, would be the only person in your whole friendship network that would really have an understanding of why Trump's getting impeached? All right, here we go. So we go there. Here's the Cold War. You ready? The red is Soviet Union. The blue is NATO in the West, the Western Bloc. And we're battling it out right here, man. We are battling it out. And you understand the Soviet Union is an empire. As Ronald Reagan said, the evil empire. And we are an empire. And as their president said, we are the evil empire. So we're really battling this out. And here is all of the Soviet Union and the client states. So here you have these, this is not, so I'm going to show you now from here on out. So these are all the territories, right? Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan and Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan and Azerbaijan and Ukraine and Belarusia and Lithuania and Moldova and so on, right? These are all Georgia. These are all these parts of this. This is a massive, massive country, you all. You got that? So we are fighting with these folks to who is going to dominate the world. And they're really powerful, and we're really powerful, and you all aren't even born yet. It doesn't matter to you, but what's going on today is entirely shaped by this. So now we go here. 30 years ago, once again, news of the week, last week is the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. So none of us believed this would happen. And the Berlin Wall is right here. It's right in Berlin, and they built a wall around West Berlin, and this was the free zone, and everything else was East Berlin. And the wall came down, and the Soviet Union started to crumble, and the West was winning. And we're going to win. Soviet Union crumbles, and so here we go. And now we go forward to this country right here. See, Ukraine. Here's Ukraine. Okay? And this is really, really important. And now, a couple years ago, Lori and I, this is when this really hit home for me. We were in Kiev. She got invited to go to Kiev as part of a NATO conference, and she was moderating a panel on women soldiers. And in this square here, lots of stuff happened in Ukraine. So from 1991, when the Soviet Union officially collapsed, one by one, the Soviet Union starts to lose all these territories, and they start going to the West. And the Soviet Union says, hang on a second, we can't have that. This would be like Penn State, the College of Agriculture, deciding, hey, we're going to break away from Penn State. And then suddenly the College of Engineering decides, hey, we're going to actually break away from Penn State and start our own university. And then another college. And suddenly Penn State is no longer Penn State. So the Soviet Union is no longer Soviet Union because all of these territories start pulling away. They want to be independent because they were once nations and they want to be nations again. But the most important one is Ukraine. Because Ukraine, because of where it's situated between Russia and the West, and because of its access to the Black Sea, the Ukraine is really, really, really critical. So the Ukrainians start to say, now we're going to pull this way. And Russia is pulling back this way. And nobody's letting anything happen. So you got this. This is big. These are the U.S. and the Soviet Union or Russia that has all these nuclear weapons, and we're trying to dominate the world. The wall comes down. Things start to happen. It all culminates into 2013 when the Ukrainians have to decide, are they going to go toward Russia or are they going to go toward to NATO and the EU and the United States? Where are they going to go? And so Russia offers them, okay, listen, come with us. We have this trade agreement and, we're going to trade with you. And I should mention that Kiev, this is Kiev. Kiev is really seen as the homeland, the birthplace in many ways of both the Russian people and the Ukrainian people. So it's really, really an important city. Okay? So it culminates together. They're battling back and forth. They have a number of votes. And finally, the people in Ukraine decide, hey, you know what? On a vote that may or may not have been fair, we're actually going to go with Russia, not the United States. And other people in the United States, other people start saying, not the United States, but the EU. And people in Ukraine start saying, whoa, hang on, we got a problem here because we want to go with the EU. We don't want to be with Russia. And so for a whole year, they're battling it out. And it all comes together on this square right here. And I took this photo, and on this square is where everything, people came out, it's Independence Square in the middle of Kiev. Everybody came out in the city and they're protesting and battling because they say the government is corrupt and they scammed the election and it wasn't a fair election. And the people, when you poll the people, we all want to go toward NATO and the EU. And yet somehow the people in power have been bought out by the Russians. And so they're going with Russia, but we don't want to go with Russia. We really want to be with the West. And so a big massacre happens on the square. And there's snipers in all these hotels that are Russian trained, Ukrainian snipers. Lots of people die. These are also people who are fighting the separatists, fighting against the Russian troops. This is just one of the billboards. This is actually Lori. That's Lori in the middle with the headphones on. And these are all Ukrainian soldiers who are fighting on the front against the Russians because they want their freedom. They don't want to be connected to Russia. And NATO wants Ukraine as part of NATO. It's really important that we have that the West has Ukraine because of all its extensive resources. So NATO is all about Ukraine. That's why this is a NATO program. And the EU, right? And Russia's still over here trying to pull away. It breaks down that most of Ukraine stays with NATO, but Crimea, part of Ukraine, but hang on, I'm going to show you this right here. Crimea, which is right here, goes with Russia, as do a couple of territories right here. They separate away from Ukraine and they all go toward Russia. And so does Crimea. And Crimea is important because it is a big Russian military base, naval base, okay? So here are people, and here's what's really important. Now you got a war. You got a civil war in Ukraine. And people are battling out. Half the country, more than half the country, want to come with the West. And you got all these other people that want to go back to Russia. They want to be part of Russia. I'm getting to Trump, by the way. This is really the big reveal. This is the whole story right here. And so then you got these other people that want to be part of Russia. And so now you got all these Ukrainians. Can anyone tell what this is? These are citizens. This is a cover for their military vehicles on the front, for their soldiers. They're soldiers. We met all these soldiers. They were wearing like tennis shoes on the battle lines. This one guy, they had like a paint can for a helmet. I'm not kidding you, right? They had nothing. They were using weapons and clothing, and the citizens would come together in these squares and make all of these big, I don't know what you call them in the military, but they would cover, armaments and tanks and whatever, so that from the air the Russians couldn't come and bomb them. So these are all these women who are doing that, right? So the U.S. in 2014 starts giving Ukraine $400 million a year in military aid to fight the Russians, to battle this out. The Russians are over here supporting the separatism, claiming control over parts of this country. The other, NATO is on this side saying, no, we need the Ukraine. The Ukraine's coming with us. It's a big tug of war. There's a war going on. As far as I'm concerned, I would like to just do nothing. We should send $400 million worth of roses to them. But we've been sending $400 million worth of weapons in order to fight the Russians, to keep them out of Ukraine, because we're still fighting the Cold War, because the Russia with the Ukraine is an empire. This is important. Russia with the Ukraine attached to it is an empire. Russia without the Ukraine is simply a big country. You got that? This is really important. Cool? Now, Trump comes along. There's a new president in the Ukraine who gets elected in the summertime, okay? Vladimir Zelensky, this guy. He's very Ukrainian looking, by the way. If you want to know what a Ukrainian man looks like, that's what he looks like. Okay? This guy gets elected. The allegation is that the $400 million that the Ukrainians need to fight the Russians, who are intent on taking over certainly parts of Ukraine, but ideally the entire country. The $400 million, Trump says, the allegation is, he says, wait a minute, Mr. Zelensky, we'll give you the $400 million, but I need you to do something for me first. And what I need you to do is do an investigation into Joe Biden's son, because I want to make the Democrats look bad. And so, do this investigation, come out and say, yes, the son of Joe Biden, who's going to be my primary contender probably in the election, was doing some really nefarious things in the Ukraine. Therefore, his father is untrustworthy. And tell that to the world, and therefore you'll be benefiting me and my campaign. And then, once you announce that you're going to do that investigation, we will release the $400 million that you've been promised, but you're not getting until you do this. So, it's an allegation. The witnesses are coming out and saying, yes, it did happen, but that's neither here nor there because I'm not part of that and I don't know. What I want to tell you is the reason this is potentially important, if you think it is, I don't know. I'd like to see Donald Trump withhold all the money and send $40 million worth of roses would have been better for me personally, or conflict negotiators. But the reason this is important is because we're still here. Let me show you this. We're still fighting this. Is the Soviet Union going to be an empire? Is Russia going to be an empire or just another country? So this is why it's big.
Yo, Sam, can you, for 30 seconds...
Yo, hang on. Give me 30 seconds.
People on Twitter have been asking you over and over again to talk about, what's that guy's name, Stephen Miller?
Oh, God.
Because he supposedly had 900 emails with Breitbart where he made some pretty racist comments.
Yeah, I got that. I know. I'll just say, if you're on Twitter, just go read his emails. All right.